We're excited to talk with Kingsley Bray. Kingsley wrote, I think we're safe to say, the definitive biography on Crazy Horse. It's called Crazy Horse, A Lakota Life. And Kingsley, I guess the first question off the top is, how does a guy who lives in England, I'm guessing you grew up there, how did you end up writing a book about Crazy Horse?
Well, like many kids here in England, but in America, of course, too. I grew up in the early 60s when we still had Westerns on television and movies, Western movies. But from a young age, I was kind of interested by what was the truth behind all this, whether it be Jesse James or Sitting Bull or something. And as time went on, it kind of focused down on the Indian side of the equation. But I was very fortunate. My father kind of encouraged my interest, and we had a very good local library, and he would bring books back to me from the library, non-fiction works, Marie Sandoz and George Hyde and Francis Parkman, all these classic writers on American Indian history. So that's how it got started anyway.
Was it hard to write that book about Crazy Horse living so far away from where he lived?
Yeah, there is a difficulty, but also it provides you some kind of perspective, on being so far away. You can perhaps see it without being bogged down with local politics or whatever. But over the years, I've gotten used to that. I've made contacts with people in the States, visited many times. I've made many contacts, both Lakota, Indian people, native people, and historians and other people out west. And I feel like I'm sort of, a kind of honorary American, just about.
You seem, at least it looks like from the pictures that you post on your Facebook page, that the Lakota Indians received your book pretty well.
Mostly, yeah, and entirely positive. There's always some degree early on, of suspicion, because people, you're talking about a community that's, a lot of it still lives in conditions of near poverty. And there's a kind of assumption that anybody who writes a book about American Indians is making $1 million. I wish it was true.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, but I think I've, 9 times out of 10, I've managed to convince people that, my interest is sincere, and, I've made many, many friendships on the reservations with Lakota people, more and more every year.
Let's talk about the Fetterman Battle for a moment, because that was kind of, I guess you could say, that's where Crazy Horse kind of began, wasn't that? Was kind of the beginning of his, not that he wasn't a warrior before then, but that was kind of his first battle of note on the way up. Was he really at the Fetterman Battle? Yeah,
I know that's come into question in recent years. John Monette, who's a friend of mine, by the way, and I've made known my views to him, suggested that there are no primary sources which say that Crazy Horse led the decoy party, which led the Fetterman command into the Fetterman Battle in 1866. But in fact, I found a direct statement by an eyewitness, Rocky Bear, another Ogallala, several years older than Crazy Horse, but who lived into the 20th century, and gave many, actually, interviews and statements to historians over the years. And one was published in, I think it was the Rapid City Journal in 1907. I have a quote here. It's a very short statement. It doesn't go into detail, but it makes plain the situation. And this is what the quote says from the Rapid City Journal. July 7th, 1907, Rocky Bear, an old Indian on Pine Ridge Reservation, says that Red Cloud, young man afraid of his horses, Red Dog, and Crazy Horse were the principal leaders in this massacre. Of course, that was the sort of verbiage you got in those days, that it was a massacre. He says, Red Cloud sent Crazy Horse with 8 Indians to the fort to try and draw the soldiers out. They circled around the fort at the same time, firing upon it. This ruse was successful, and as soon as the little command under Captain Fetterman was seen leaving the fort, the Indians retreated, at the same time pretending that their horses were lame and tired. Now, I prefer a few more details, but that gets the job done for me. Here's a statement by an Indian who was present, who knew all the principles involved, Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, and the rest, stating explicitly that Crazy Horse was one of the decoys, and the implication named is that he was either the leader or a leader in that party.
Let's move to the other battle, the big battle, the Little Bighorn. How big of a role, because this is debated too, How big of a role did Crazy Horse have in the Little Bighorn?
Well, I mean, if anything, this was even a larger body of warriors would have been present at the Little Bighorn than had been at the Fetterman fight. I think there's probably about 1,500 warriors at the Little Bighorn. And again, it's like I said about Red Cloud. There's no Indian leader moving these guys around like chess pieces. But what you have, Crazy Horse is still at this time, tactically, he's still actively leading warriors in the fight, and he's right there. But and this is the point about Indian warfare, it's to do with inspirational leadership. And no warrior was more inspirational than Crazy Horse. Even to the extent that he seemed to make the battle run on his own time. What I mean by that is like at the Reno fight, the opening phases of the battle when Custer has directed Reno to attack the upper end of the village. Crazy Horse takes 20 minutes, maybe longer, kind of getting in his horses, going through his medicine preparations, and the warriors are fretting. But it's a kind of morale booster too, because it's like saying, hey, this is running on my speed, it's running on my terms. And then when he leads that line of warriors, 200 or more warriors, they make all the difference when they crash into Reno's position. And, the descriptions of the women calling Crazy Horse is coming, at last, as it were. But, the morale boost that is built in that warrior force just turns that phase of the battle. And he does it again later in the battle at the Keogh position, and then I suspect later in the last moments on Last Stand Hill. He defines key moments in the battle by his inspirational presence.
From the Little Bighorn, let's go to the end at Camp Robinson, where he ultimately died. Why was it that the Indians seemed to turn on him in the end?
Well, it's to do with politics, as is so much in our lives. He was a warrior. I was stressing that at Little Bighorn just the year before his end, and he remained that. He had no ambitions to be a civil chief, like all the contemporaries, like Red Cloud and so forth. But his fame thrust him willy-nilly into a position of great political influence. And so when he arrived at the agency in the spring of 1877, as he understood it, General Crook had undertaken to recommend a separate agency, a separate reservation in the northern hunting grounds. He actually had expressed a preference for a site very near where Sheridan is today. And he thought this was all on the agenda. But as the summer of 1877 moved forward, it became plain that this was not realistic. These expectations were not realistic. And most Lakota people had no wish for another year of war. I think Crazy Horse, on the other hand, was determined to keep that northern reservation, the separate agency in their hunting grounds, at the top of the political agenda, and people backed out. So what I'm saying is that I don't think we shouldn't be looking at saying Red Cloud's a bad guy or Spotted Tail's a bad guy and Crazy Horse is the good guy. It's not it's not that simple. These are guys fighting for political gains.
So in a way, not much has changed.
Yeah. Exactly so. And so we have to see these people as real people. Not impossible saints, which, some people would like to have, nor as mindless savages, as previous generations might have viewed. They're real people living in real time with real problems. And never more so than in 1877. What a pressure cooker that must have been for those people. It's like, the pressures those people were under would be like if, some guys came down from Mars today and said to us, what you're doing, it's all wrong. You've got to live a completely different way. And how would we react,
Sure.
Especially if they suddenly handled all the political levers. So it's no wonder that tragic events unfolded. Yes, a lot of Indians, a lot of Lakotas decided that Crazy Horse was too much of a loose cannon. They were afraid that things were going to slip into war and that their women and children's positions now, living right next to Camp Robinson and Camp Sheridan and so forth, their positions were that much more vulnerable. They did not want to run the risk of being dragged into a new war. And so they tried to sideline Crazy Horse, but then he made his break to Spotted Tail Agency, where he was detained, brought back to Camp Robinson, Red Cloud Agency the following day, and in a tragic sequence of misunderstanding, when he's taken into the guardhouse at Camp Robinson, he tries to make a break for it and is bayoneted as he exits the guardhouse. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy in Shakespearean terms,
Why did Little Big Man, I never understood that part of because Little Big Man is there, he grabs his hand when he's got the knife. Was he his ally at that point, or was he his enemy?
Good question. Little Big Man and Crazy Horse had been strong war partners through the 1860s and 1870s, but now Little Big Man is eyeing a position among the people who've surrendered that spring, Crazy Horse's people. Little Big Man is seeing a political opening for a leader who will cooperate more with the Americans. Unlike Crazy Horse, who's withdrawn all kind of cooperation with the USA, Little Big Man, in other words, he's a rival. He's a rival for leadership in that village. And he's in the way of making himself indispensable to General Crook, Lieutenant Clark, and so forth. That is why he tries to detain, to hold Crazy Horse back. And as he does so, the standing guard outside the guardhouse, delivers 2 textbook thrusts to Crazy Horse's lower back. It's, again, I come back to it, it's a tragedy.
Well, it's probably, a lot of the reason why we're still talking about it today. It has so many different elements. It's got drama. It's got all the elements of a great story. And so here we are, almost 150 years later. Let me ask you this. I came up with this. I've never heard anybody else mention this before, but I'd be curious of your take. I always thought there's a lot of similarities between Crazy Horse and Christ in the sense of they both died like mid to late 30s. They both died after their people had turned on them. They both had like mythical status after they died, and their bodies were never found. I'd forgotten the bodies were never found. So, I thought that it's kind of an interesting tie-in of the two. Completely different cultures, obviously, but there's just so many similarities between the Christ story and the Crazy Horse story.
And both they're involved in societies that have been, again, co-opted by an invader, whether that be Roman occupation or the American presence. There are parallels, which I think a lot of Lakota people have drawn to in the 20th and 21st centuries. He has become, to many, a kind of Lakota Christ.
He's a symbol, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And all the more potent for being a symbol. He carries on, I said that in battle he instilled this incredible inspirational morale in his followers. The amazing thing, I suppose, is that he still conveys something of that. People still sing songs attributed to him in sweat lodges and so forth, in ceremonies to assist in reclaiming the Black Hills and so forth. That is the amazing thing, that here we are, almost a century and a half on, and he still carries this mystique, this cult. I'm reminded, yes, there's a Christ-like parallels, but think about Mongolia, and there's a cult of Genghis Khan, today. These people who've, been dead for centuries, and yet whose their potency as you say, as symbols, has, never been compromised. It's absolutely there.
Are you going to do another book, with the Lakota Indians? I mean, you did all that research. I was guessing there'd be another book in there somewhere.
There's another book in the pipeline. I've been researching for 2 or 3 years now into Lakota history, if you like, before Lewis and Clark. So before the Americans hit the plains. And I've come up with some amazing sources, both French colonial records that I've been able to dig out, but also I've got some amazing Lakota historical sources, traditions going back in winter camps, many generations, and it's exciting. And I think it's going to give us a new perspective on the native history of the Northern Plains. So I'm expecting to have that finished in the next few months, and hopefully in the next year or two we'll have that out with University of Oklahoma Press again.
Oh, great. It's Kingsley Bray, and he's got the book Crazy Horse, The Lakota Life. Kingsley, thank you very much for your time.
Dave, thank you. It's been a great pleasure, and I wish I could be out there on the plains with you real soon.